fact, the 12th edition of the Real Men Don't Play show, hosted by Black Tom Smith, it's been a hell of a 2 weeks. Started off with the Supreme Court deciding that it would no longer be necessary to protect African Americans or other so-called minorities with what we used to know as affirmative action. And then all hell broke loose right here in Los Angeles. Master Donald Sterling, the ruler of the basketball plantation known as the Los Angeles Clippers, got caught. And just when we thought that was bad, it got worse when we found out that one of the alleged preeminent organizations that represent the interests of so-called colored people had decided they were going to once again honor Mr. Sterling with a lifetime achievement award. When I heard that he was going to receive another award, I forgot he got the first one. And I remember years ago, people would walk up on the stage and receive that award and break out into tears, and it was always an emotional and uplifting moment as they talked about this person's accomplishments and achievements. And I'd like to go back and visit that tape and see how they prepped that and presented that tape of Donald Sterling's achievement as it relates to the African American community. Be that as it may, I have a guest on the line right now who is the antithesis of what the NAACP has put themselves in the position of representing. And his name is Wendell Stimley. He's the president and founder of Black IPO, which is a construction management company that operates in about 5 cities. Wendell, let's talk about it.
How you doing?
Well, that's a good question, man. How are you doing?
I'm fine.
Now, where are you at right now?
Atlanta.
Atlanta, Georgia. Just to kind of give my audience an understanding of what it is that you do and why I wanted you to, in a sense, sit in on this conversation about ownership, responsibility, and accountability.
Okay, well, we pretty much find projects, finance them, and go into the managing of constructing them, from the design to the finished product. That being said, I know what you want to get to is how have we got ourselves in a situation in 2014 as African Americans where we are taking sponsorship from folks into our organizations that may or may not have a show us in a very good light or think very much about us.
Well, with that being said, there's also the question of ownership. I had announced earlier in the week that I was going to have a guest on my show who was prepared to make a very significant contribution towards the purchase of the Los Angeles Clippers. And in fact, I was speaking of you. What are your thoughts on ownership as it relates to sports franchises?
Well, I think it's time for, as African Americans, if we're going to venture down the road of engaging that type of ownership, we need to make sure that it has a voice with a significant stake versus just a minor stake in the ownership of any type of, especially a sports team, because you affect so many areas of the economy, from vendors, suppliers, concessions, etc. So the model should be, and I was glad to see this week that a number of individuals came out and said that they were interested in taking a stake in a team or buying part of a team, but it definitely has to be in the majority or at least a significant level of ownership that will give you a voice and give you a seat at the table. To have token ownership that gives you no voice or a seat at the table, then a lot of the situations continue, because the myth is that we get upset and organizations get all riled up when people talk about you and you find out about it. But the truth of the matter is, if you don't have a seat at the table, they might be talking about you and you just don't get an opportunity to hear or know about that. So we have to be careful in getting too excited about solutions that don't have an economic impact to change the playing field, because the whole process either continues or repeats itself. Next time, do we have a videotape or do we have an audio tape? And the only way to really diversify something to ensure that everybody has a equal voice.
Now, what would be the ideal scenario based upon some of the conversations that you and I have had with some other people this week about positioning ourselves to acquire a franchise like the Los Angeles Clippers?
Well, I mean, the first thing, contrary to what anybody wants to say or believe, it becomes a matter of money. You know, it's going to have a significant amount of capital, and it's probably going to be a conglomerate type situation to be able to put together the amount of capital to, as I say, become a majority shareholder or actually acquisition. So egos are going to have to set aside, and it's going to take planning. It's going to take capital infusion. But, I mean, it can be done. It's not, you know, African Americans right now are considered a $1 billion contributor to the economy. The problem is most of our $1 billion in that economy is going to consumer products.
You mean trillion?
Very little of it is going to generating inner city wealth. So we have to also address that situation to try to figure out what would make it attractive to the average citizen in the urban America to start thinking about transferring some of our consumer money into wealth building money.
Now, you completed a project here in Los Angeles over at the hospital. Give us an example of the benefit of being in a lead position as you was on that particular project.
Well, when you start talking about projects at the magnitude of Martin Luther King Hospital, which was done with Hansel Phelps, you're talking about projects at $400 and $500 million. And when you have a project of that capacity, if you have a seat at the table, then you can start talking about things like vendors and suppliers and get down to some of the small businesses that usually don't get an opportunity to get any visibility because there's no one sitting at the table that cares about them. We have all these community reinvestment acts, all these bank mergers that were supposed to bring all this capital to inner city urban America, but yet we can't find ownership by those communities in any of the major development projects going on in their own community. So when we have a chance to direct that type of money in the direction of jobs and vendors and suppliers, we have an obligation to try to make that happen.
So what role did you play in that project?
Well, we were the projects that design build are done from vertically, and you also have the infrastructure. And we had the infrastructure site responsibility, and the lead CM, Hansel Phelps, was a vertical constructor. So you have to get all of the footings in, piles in, all of the concrete site work, everything has to get done to support the foundation. Then you bring the building up vertically.
So how much money did you have to manage on that project? yourself?
A project like that, we'll do about $10 million under management.
Okay, Wendell, I want you to hold on because I have a in-studio guest that understands the language that you're speaking, and I'm going to have to start making sure that we are able to articulate these sometimes technical phrases to the point where people outside of the industry will completely understand what we're trying to accomplish with this conversation. So give me a minute, and we'll be right back. The music you're listening to is from an album by a gentleman out of Birmingham, Alabama, by the name of D. Bradley, and that cut is called Too Much Man to Cry. And I tell you, boy, woo, it's been enough to cry about here lately to just say, oh, my Lord, Lord, Lord. I'm blessed with an in-studio guest who was riding with us last week, and he's going to be a frequent contributor to the Real Men Don't Play show, first and foremost because he epitomizes what men are and what men do. He's back tonight because this subject matter intersects with some of the things that he does for a profession. His name is Mark Williams. The company that he proudly represents was started by his mother, the late Miss Juanita Tate, and that's the Concerned Citizens of South Central Los Angeles. Welcome back, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. It's an honor and a pleasure.
As you absorb this conversation right now, what are your first impressions and thoughts?
In terms of what, Bobby?
The ownership aspect and some of the things that have happened that really put the spotlight on our absence at the table when it comes to projects like the one Wendell just described, the project that you just completed successfully that is the opposite of what usually happens, as well as this mess with the Clippers.
We have no future without ownership and productive investment. Nobody's going to secure a future for us. Nobody's going to secure a place in this city or anywhere else. We have to take our capital. We have to pool it when that's appropriate, and we have to invest in ourselves. And until we do that, we're always going to be subject to other folks who have taken the responsibility to invest and plan a future for themselves. We're always going to be subject to their interests and their reality. So I don't see any alternative to that.
Now, real quickly, what is the short-term, long-term impact of the development that you just completed at the corner of Central Avenue and Slauson here in Los Angeles?
Well, it's an 80,000 square foot shopping center that was many years in the development process. But from the time that the development left the drawing board, it actually stimulated the economy. It stimulated other development in the area. So it had a tremendous impact on the local economy in terms of jobs, economic development, even before it completed. And in many ways, thank God, it's obsolete by the time we cut the ribbon because the demand for goods and services in the area, quality goods and services, outstrip the supply even now.
Wow.
So the project is well received. It's a long time coming. It includes, it's a typical sort of project in most other areas in the region. So it's a supermarket anchored project with Northgate Gonzalez as the main supermarket. But you have other retailers, shops and restaurants that are commonplace in other places. Waba Grill,
Panda Express,
Panda Express,
Chase Bank,
Starbucks,
yeah.
Chase Bank, so on and so forth. So it doesn't look anything, it's not very, very different from development that goes on in other places, but what it makes it unique is where it is, not what it
And
is.
the face of the project, people of color.
This is correct. You know, we took a lead role in conceptualizing, developing, and implementing the project. We took a development role, and now we take an ownership role and a management role as well.
Wonderful. We have a gentleman on the line who was a guest a couple of weeks ago. He's an L.A. native. In my estimation, all time one of the elite center fielders to ever play the game of baseball at the professional level. Currently, he's back with the team that he won a world championship with in 1990. Now his position is an assistant to the general manager of the Cincinnati Reds. I want to welcome to the show Eric Davis. Eric, how you doing this evening?
I'm doing good, Bobby. How you doing, man?
All right. It's ironic that we're having this topic tonight because at one point you owned a construction company, didn't you?
Well, I had some. I did have a couple of dollars in there. I did do some developing, yes.
Okay. And being a native of this area, next time you in the vicinity, please go down and check out the new. What's the name of the joint?
Oh, it's called Juanita Tate Marketplace.
At the corner of.
It's at the corner of Central and Slauson Avenue.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right on. I would definitely partake in that.
Yeah. So, as an assistant to a general manager, we're going to, pivot back into the central subject matter for this evening. That is the impact of ownership, the responsibility of ownership, and the accountability that you have to a community. And in that instance, we've seen some things happen that have been eye-opening since the revelations around the Donald Sterling situation. First and foremost, Eric, what are your impressions of what has transpired since those tapes came out? Subsequent to that, he has been banned, and there's all kind of stuff going on.
Well, when it was first brought to light, I was very disappointed. Shocked? No, but I was disappointed. I personally had some run-ins with Donald. I mean, I've known Donald for years. I've been to his house, but am I surprised? No. I'm one of the few athletes who've had racial comments directly at them when Morris Shot called me $1 million nigga years ago. So it's nothing that goes on that would catch me by surprise. But to the magnitude and the consistency of the dialogue, which was more disappointing than anything, because he's not probably the first person that ever feels that way. There's a lot of us that have said things behind closed doors. Mm-hmm. Who am I to say that we're not? We would definitely be kidding ourselves, but to have it go on, and there's a possibility of hours of tapes is disturbing.
Mm. Since you've transitioned from a player to the administrative side of the sport, what, in your estimation, will it take for and the gentleman who's also on hold right now, his name is Wendell Stimley. He's calling out of Atlanta. He runs a company called Black IPO. And we've had several discussions. Wendell told me something that was really thought-provoking, and that is we really only have in all of the sports one African-American who is the owner, and that's Michael Jordan. What are your thoughts about how do we move from where we are to acquiring majority stakes in professional sports franchises, Eric?
Well, the first thing is that's a very, very small type fraternity. And just like any other fraternities or any other franchisees that you have, not in just America, but in the world, you have to figure out a way to infiltrate that. It was just the way that Jackie Robinson infiltrated baseball. He was the right man for the right spot. At some point, having Michael Jordan, is he the right man for the right spot? I think so. But he also had the capacity to be able to pay for the things that he wanted by himself. The finances is the most important thing, and how you acquire your finances is the most important thing. Okay, anytime somebody has to let you into their circle, they have to be be confident that you can handle the situations from now on. And are we capable of doing that? Absolutely. Are we in a point where we have a gang of resources as an individual to do that? Probably not. But collectively, we have to figure out a way to be allowed, if I can say that, but we have to put ourselves in situations where those decisions can be made, and when they're made, it's by reputable people that's not going to give us a bad name.
Now, I'd like for you to share with our listening audience and my in-studio guest and Wendell Stimley in Atlanta something that we talked about a few weeks ago off the grid, so to speak. When you told me before Buck O'Neil died, he shared with you the fact that there was a situation with the Negro Leagues and the possibility of having several of the teams become a part of Major League Baseball. Kind of revisit that conversation.
Well, it was a conversation that I did have with Buck. I was doing actually, me and him was together on a sports show actually some years ago, and I'm a historian. I mean, I love sports, and we were just talking about the time that when Jackie Robinson actually made his debut, how wonderful it was for this country. And for black people, it actually hurt us more from a financial and economic status than it did to having him join. And the reason that was is because in the Negro League, we owned everything. We owned the restaurants. We owned the hotels. We owned the transportation. We owned everything that Major League Baseball owns now. And the competition was so lopsided to a point that when they used to play those guys, it would be 18-1 and 15-2, and they would just dominate actually Major League Baseball.
Wow.
So he actually said that there was a point that it was getting to where the MLB was going to have to make a decision whether they would was going to have to allow some of those teams to join forces. Not knowing that Branch Rickey had this idea in mind, was to infiltrate that with one player, because anytime that the Negro Leagues went to Wrigley Field and some of these major league towns, they sold out, and people would come from miles and miles to see all of the great black ball players and stuff. So he said it was a great possibility that they were going to have to merge, and if that would have been the case, then there would have been our black owners in Major League Baseball at that particular time. He didn't go into particular cities and things of that nature, but I found it interesting because of the fact that we owned everything about what we are today. When you had the Negro League, it was just as popular, but we didn't have the sponsorship and things of that nature, but it was just as popular, and it set us back because of the towns that we were in, and black communities thrived on the Negro League, the way some of these cities thrive on Major League Baseball or football or basketball. And when that was taken away, it decimated the economy so bad that it actually hurt the people who couldn't play ball more than it helped the blacks who could play.
Wow. Hey, just hold tight for a second, Eric. I want Wendell to chime in on this because he has a relationship with a man that you may know of because he put in a valid offer for the Minnesota Twins several years ago by the name of Donald Watkins. You remember that situation, Eric?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so Wendell, can we get Wendell back on the line? Wendell.
And this is what we have to address. It doesn't. You can have a fraternity, you can have a good old boys club, and as long as everybody plays fair, and as long as the playing field is level, and as long as there is economic opportunity for all, people normally are not going to get too bent out of shape. But when folks start to feel as though you're using the fraternity as an exclusionary device, that affects jobs and economic opportunity and vendors and suppliers, then it becomes something ugly. And that's kind of what people feel they got a glimpse of this week, past week. And a gentleman called me, and it was Donald, and he had been vetted and financially qualified.
You're talking about Donald Watkins,
independently,
right? You're speaking of
to
Donald.
buy the Minnesota Twins, and had great ideas about expanding the footprint and the services and the edifice around the stadium. And obviously, I was flattered, being a young person with a young firm, to even be considered to be, at that table of as providing those type of services, and to have him spend that much time and that much money and that much due diligence, and just because they could, and just because the commissioner may not have felt, well, that's exactly the person that they want, then that's when it becomes a problem. When you can stop something because it's African American based that has already been vetted and pre-qualified to do it. And this went all the way to 60 Minutes. Dan Rather even conducted this interview. So, I mean, that's when it gets to be what's really going on behind those closed doors that keeps us in a field worker type mentality.
Now, let me just kind of capsulize what you just said. You're saying you had a relationship with Donald Watkins as it related to him acquiring the team, and you were going to do some of the construction work on that stadium project.
Yeah, I talked to him. He had already been vetted to buy the team, and obviously his ideas were to improve the facilities that went along with that. And for the kind of money he was putting up on the table, his own money, there was no reason for that deal not to get approved by the owners and by Commissioner Seeley.
Okay. Hey, hold on, Wendell. I want to flip back to Eric for a minute. And Eric, you still on the line?
Uh-huh.
What I want to ask you right now, let's look at the Cincinnati Reds organization when you first came in the organization and now. What has changed, good or bad, over the period of 20-some years that you have been associated with that organization?
Well, we had went from being the first Cincinnati Reds was the first professional baseball organization in America. So the history that they have is long-standing. Prior to me getting drafted, it was a phenomenal organization. It was ran by great, upstanding people. And then we had a situation where Marge Schott actually took over the 51% of the ownership, and then it was a law. I don't really think that she was a baseball person who knew anything about baseball. She was a woman who was able to purchase a team, and a lot of her views weren't baseball orientated. She was a kind of person who would say, why do we need scouts? All they do is watch baseball. That should let you know what her intellect was about the sport. And the city of Cincinnati paid for that because our organization wasn't nearly as strong in a development side, even though we won a title, a championship under March. It really put a black cloud on the organization about how it was being ran, what people thought about our organization. There was a lot of people. We lost a lot of great scouts. We lost a lot of great front office personnel because of her ignorance and not knowing what to do with this franchise. And so when you look around and you see how the dynamics have changed, and now that the owner group that we have are baseball people, and you can just see the revelation of how the fans are, how the players feel, even what we do now, as far as our Hall of Fame in Cincinnati and the new stadium and how many players return that played an intimate part in the success and the history of this franchise. Mark Schott never opened the doors for those things, and so now you see a great deal of ex-players involved in some capacity with the existing players, whether it's through coming to training camp or different events that we have. It involves everybody that was part of that family, and for years we didn't have that. And so I've seen it come to full circle, good, bad, and then back to good to where it is now, and that's solely based on the Castellini family and what they stand for as not just owners but as people in general. Is because you can see how this organization is being ran, not just for whites but blacks, Hispanics, and we have a different variety of a lot of different people that works up under that, and you can see how important it is in diversity for our ownership to do what they do, is because it allows people to come to work and do the things that they're doing and not feel like they're being watched or being scrutinized or being discriminated against or something to that capacity. So it's a feel good feeling for the fans and ownership in Cincinnati right now.
Mark, what are your thoughts on some of the things that we've talked about in the last 15 minutes or so?
Well, there are two things that are important. One is just as a matter of principle around the Clippers or the Donald Sterling situation. We have to be very, very careful and mindful of the idea of depriving somebody of their property based on their beliefs. Right? So that's a separate issue. Sometime when the furor dies down a little bit and we can view it a little more soberly in terms of what comes next, we got to be very, very careful about supporting the proposition of denying a person their property based on their misguided beliefs. But then the second thing is Eric's conversations with Buck O'Neil speak to me. Right now in the United States, there's a tremendous opportunity, there's tremendous growth in soccer. Donald Sterling bought the Clippers for $12.5 million, according to Los Angeles Times reports. And some 20 or 30 years later, if he's forced to sell it, if he decides to sell it, he's going to sell it for more than $1 billion, and folks are lining up to do that. It would seem to me that whoever buys it next, are they getting value for money? Right? And would that be the best investment of resources in the sports industry to spur economic development in communities like mine? Maybe, maybe not. There's some. We could have a discussion about that. But what I do know is that there's a possibility for sensible investments of $3 to $5 million to build facilities that can house and produce a wonderful brand of soccer, and the sky's the limit over the next 10, 15, 20 years. So when black folks are talking about investing in professional athletics, professional sports, the ground floor for the NBA was many, many decades ago, right? But there are other ground floors. There are other possibilities for folks who have some resources to invest in some vision. Instead of, it'd be a wonderful thing to own a major sports franchise. There's no doubt about it. And for folks who can pool their money with other institutions and other individuals to make that happen, it would make me proud, to have black folks to have a piece of that larger pie. But I'm not sure that that's the best value for the investment. There are other opportunities that I know about, and I would love to talk to anybody who'd be interested in finding out more about it.
Man, great point. Wendell, let me get Wendell back into this fray here. Wendell, based on what Mark just said, is it a way to split the difference? Is it a way to kind of peel into this lane that he's speaking about and at the same time still be able to get an equity position in a major franchise and make some money?
Well, Yeah, if we listen to what Eric said, the very important point is you're never going to have the climate such that African American group will be not necessarily blocked as much at the table like Donald Watkins was, who more than qualified to buy the Minnesota Twins. So let's understand. We got to understand your black skin does make a difference.
Okay.
You can't do, even if you got the money, the intellect, and the wherewithal to do because of that black skin. So you got to first be able to process and understand that's just a problem for some people. Okay. So when you start talking about entering fraternities and historically exclusive venues, you got to have some type of leverage. You're never going to probably have this type of leverage in acquiring ownership with a qualified group. See, what folks don't understand, there have been a lot of qualified groups that have been denied access to purchase. So we first got to understand that this hasn't been a lack of capital. This hasn't been a lack of education. I heard somebody say the other day, well, does Floyd Mayweather have the background and the education to own, to be a majority shareholder in a sports franchise? Well, I tell you one thing. I think Floyd Mayweather has showed more business savvy than Mars showed when she owned the Cincinnati Reds. So, I mean, we got to keep it in perspective that black skin is going to have an impact on you being approved. So, knowing that this situation does lend to at least people allowing you to be heard and get a seat at the table and look at your offer and take your offer seriously. On another note, if Mr. Sterling has the right to hold on to the team until the court tells him he cannot hold on to the team no more, or tell the owner, say, this is at such a financial detriment, we can't allow you to just continue to hold on, because what will happen to that asset? It may be worth $1 billion today, but if they keep putting them black signs up on CarMax and United Airlines and everybody else saying we're not going to be a sponsor on this team while he owns it, and if he wants to hold it for another 5 years, it may be only worth $400 million. So we got to keep in perspective that business and economics is dynamic. It's not static. It don't wait. It keeps moving, and the rules change on a daily basis. So if you're devaluing an asset, it's like a roller coaster going downhill. You got to do something to stabilize that, because people aren't going to keep investing money into something that's not bringing back a return.
Okay, everybody sit tight. We're going to take a real short pause, and the last segment of the show, I want to look at solutions, alternatives, and the way forward. So we'll be right back in about 60 seconds. All right, we're back and still black. The last segment, I want to throw one little thing out there about accountability from an organizational standpoint. What's troubling to me has been the fact that it was revealed to all of us that for $45,000, an organization that's been around nearly 100 years was prepared to give Donald Sterling his second lifetime achievement award. My concern is that's not a game changer, $45,000. But what it did in terms of the world view of that, when people heard that this man was going to be the recipient of a lifetime achievement award, and everybody knew that paid attention to the news that he had done some things over the course of the last 20 years that were so reprehensible that it seemed inconsistent with the thought of the award. So I'm going to start with my in-studio guest, Mark, and get your feelings about that.
We can start by understanding that there is no particular organization that claims to represent black folks that can represent all black folks. There's such a diversity in terms of where we live, what we earn, what we believe, that I'm not exactly sure who got the benefit of the bargain, because what does it matter that that particular organization supported Donald Sterling? They don't have a tremendous presence and a tremendous credibility like it once did. So there are always going to be opportunists. There are always going to be folks that get in the short line for whatever reason. The $45,000 that the organization received may not be a game changer from our perspective, but it may have been a game changer from the perspective of the people who are in a leadership position in that organization. And that's tragic, because what they've done is sold their credibility for $45,000. And at the end of the day, no, that amount of money is not worth it. But they're not unique in that situation. There are thousands of nonprofits that go out of existence every year. After the 2008 financial collapse and the real estate market collapse, nonprofits started to go out of business, foundations started to cut back, and organizations that don't have a firm financial footing based in business, the folks who existed as charities and things like that, they're at the mercy of contributors. And I think that particular organization found itself in that position. Or it could be worse. It just could be entrepreneurial opportunism masquerading as representing the interests of a particular community or a particular constituency.
Okay. Eric Davis, what are your thoughts on what we saw and how it made you feel?
Well, it was kind of unique because I looked at it two ways. I looked at it one way from a financial standpoint, from a nonprofit organization, to thrive off the donations and sponsorships. What is the value, and how high do you hold the value and the credibility of what you're trying to accomplish as an organization? If my $45,000 is well spent, and I feel good about where that money's going, and the kids that I'm helping who are in dire need, do I accept this money knowing where it's coming from? We've been dealing with that for ages. Now, you know, when you talk about drug money, how it did to Harlem in the 50s and 60s, you're talking about what the cartels did in Miami, how it built up all of South Beach. And you talk about a lot of different things where unsophisticated money has helped transform lives in a positive way. Where do we draw that line? To me, it's based on the individual organization and what you stand for. I see it both ways. I see it as a situation where, yeah, I'm in dire need, and I would rather say I would take this $75,000 or $45,000 and do more good than it would for me to close my doors and not do any good at all. So I think it's based up to them. I know that NAACP has to feel shamed. I know a lot of people that's around the country probably feel ashamed for them, but you have to look at the criteria on how it came about. I don't understand how anybody can get 2 Lifetime Achievement Awards. I mean, you have to leave and come back, you know what I'm saying, and do some more good. So if they was going to give him another award, it should have been a Lifetime Achievement Award. You know what I'm saying? It should have been a neighborhood award or something of that nature. But the award that was getting ready to be given was a second term of a Lifetime Achievement Award. And I think that's what got more people baffled than anything, was that the name of the award that they were given. If they would have gave him the Good Charlie Award and he paid $45,000 for that, okay, yeah, we can rub it a certain way. But you talking about a Lifetime Achievement Award when you've known for a long period of time what was a part of this man's resume on how he was treating blacks as well as the Latinos. Yeah. As far as a lifetime, no, I can't fathom that from any form. But to understand the side of why am I receiving this money? It's totally up to the people. Now, I've seen where people have said, well, we're not going to take any more, or we're going to give the money back and things of that nature. So it's really predicated on the people and what integrity that they have with that foundation and what kind of financial strength that they have that could probably get them out of the situation to help the people that they're trying to help.
Oh, man, I can fully appreciate your response to that, particularly the last segment. Hey, Wendell,
that's what bothered me. You know.
Okay, let me holler at Wendell on that. Wendell, what say you about this?
Well, first thing, y'all got to take ownership. That was the Los Angeles chapter of the NAACP that thought that had some type of logical basis.
Wait a minute, hold on. Wait a minute, why you had to put the Los Angeles part under that? It's the NAACP.
No, that's what CNN said. The Los Angeles chapter of the NAACP thought that made some type of sense. So first we got to clarify, because when I think of the NAACP, I think the founding fathers, I think of, Medgar Evers in the driveway. I think about all the stuff the NAACP has done positively, and to have that tarnish in that way just was, it was hurtful. But the organizations have to survive. That in no way what goes on in Los Angeles should be duplicated anywhere else in the country. I would hope that, especially these double Lifetime Achievement Awards. But on another note, and I don't want to belabor the point, Eric and myself was at a gospel brunch 10 years ago, sponsored by the NBA Players Association here in Atlanta. And it was All-Star Weekend. And Eric, I don't know if you remember, but we had enough money in that room then and now to buy any team that's for sale. So we have a direction of capital issue and a consumer issue. We don't have a lack of resource issue. But back to this NAACP thing. When you get these local chapters and they start having these dinners and these suppers and these hot wings, I'm telling you, these dinner sponsorships can turn your motive and objective bad. It just goes bad because you put that platform out there that you're taking donations, and then the next thing you know, they want a title sponsor, and folks like this show up that got equality problem, and the next thing you know, you got an LA chapter situation where somebody's getting a double Lifetime Achievement Award for knowingly documented in court records of discriminating against housing against African Americans. That is totally outside of the mission and outside of the founding fathers' vision of what the NAACP should be doing. And that should never, ever, ever happen again. And I hope and I'm sure that at higher levels, more reasonable minds are saying we have to have a criteria of donorship and sponsorship, especially when we're sponsoring to have these galas with dinners and suppers, and these holidays have gone out of control. So that's my 10 cents on it.
Okay, I'm going to whiz back around the table, and I'm going to give each one of y'all 60 seconds for final thoughts, and I'll start with Mark here in the studio.
Well, first off, it's an honor and a pleasure to have a conversation with these gentlemen. Both of them are heroes of mine. There's opportunity in the midst of apparent crisis. And as I'm saying, there are growth industries. There are folks among the black community with tremendous resources, tremendous facility, tremendous experience, tremendous education. It'd be great if we could share some of that and make some collective decisions about where best to focus our collective efforts, and we can get return on our investments and our efforts.
Okay, thank you. That's Mark Williams here in studio. Eric Davis, final thoughts.
Well, okay. I do remember the brunch in Atlanta. We had a great time, and there was some most powerful people that was down at that brunch. But I just want to close by saying that I hope that there's a learning curve that was brought, especially to blacks, about how we're still being viewed in this country, and as from a resource standpoint. Sometimes we can become our own worst enemy with greed and selfishness. And I just hope that we can eradicate that side because we do have resources, we do have the intellect, we do have everything it takes in order to not just own a professional franchise, but to do anything that we want to do. And if we learn anything, if we can't pull together under this circumstances, then when, where, and how.
Man. Eric, eventually I want you to come in the studio, and I'm going to continue to reach out to you because you're a very insightful and resourceful brother, and I thank you once again for participating in the show this evening.
No problem.
Hey, Wendell, final thoughts.
Final thought. How do we get people to value us? And how do we truly appreciate and value ourselves? I don't care how small a business you start. You got to start that business with the idea of exponential growth. Because business is about generating revenue and generating income and eventually generating some type of financial stability. So you got to start any business with the idea of exponential growth, domestically and even internationally. And stop letting other folks put limits on you that have your mind polluted with the fact, well, the reason they own the teams is because nobody's stepped up to ever try to buy one. There has been many attempts with capital, with the intellect, with the structure, and we got to understand in corporate America, just like in sporting America, there is a need for us to understand that leveling that playing field is going to take some effort by all of us. And that effort should not only go from the guy that is owning the corporation, or owning the franchise, or owning the sports team, but to the person that's trying to become a vendor in that corporation, or that franchise, or that sports team. So I just hope that in urban America and in black America, we start to look at all of this of not limiting yourself based on what other people perceive about you and take the initiative to look at it, I'm going to win irregardless of what you think about me.
Okay, Wendell, thank you. And my final thoughts on this subject tonight is ownership, as we have seen it exhibited over the last couple of weeks, is about just that. You have a right in this country to get rich. You got a right to go broke. And as African Americans, I think it's very, very important that we understand one thing. If you don't take a risk, you can't expect a reward. And this is evidence is why the show tonight is evidence that we need to look at ownership, entrepreneurship, self-reliance, self-determination. And finally, I want the people out here around the country and the world that see this book know that you can purchase it from iTunes and Amazon. I'll be in Barnes & Nobles in the foreseeable future, I hope in the next couple of weeks. And in the meantime, you can get my book directly by contacting me at bobby@realmendon'tplay.com, or you can go to my website, www.realmendon'tplay.com. I hope this show in some way tonight has been helpful, inspiring, insightful, in some way worth your time that you took to watch it. And that's the end of it for tonight. And as I close, as always, thank you for letting me be myself again. We out of here.